Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about European exploration of the Americas from 1491 to 1607 and its far-reaching impacts. This period marks a pivotal turning point in the history of Europe and the Americas, a time when the world began to become interconnected for the very first time. Before we begin, let's take a moment to review our learning objectives for today. 1. Understand why Europeans explored the Americas. We're not just talking about the fact that they explored them. We'll dig into the motivations that drove them to take to the seas. 2. Identify the key explorers and their achievements. We'll discuss how figures like Christopher Columbus reshaped history. 3. Analyze the impact European exploration had on Native American societies. We'll examine not only the positive changes, but also the challenges and hardships it brought to indigenous peoples. With these goals in mind, let's begin today's lesson. Why did Europeans explore the Americas? Why were Europeans willing to take such significant risks to explore uncharted territories? Their motivations can be summed up with the 3 Gs. 1. Gold. Europe was hungry for wealth. In particular, they sought spices and precious metals like gold and silver from Asia. The New World offered a new opportunity to find these valuable resources. 2. God. Many explorers were driven by a desire to spread Christianity. They saw it as their mission to convert indigenous peoples and save their souls. 3. Glory. Explorers and their nations sought fame and prestige. Claiming new lands elevated the status of both individuals and their countries. These 3 factors were the driving forces behind European exploration. But it's important to note that these motivations weren't just about economics, religion, or politics. They were also deeply tied to how Europeans viewed the world and their place in it. Key European explorers. The age of exploration brought forth many famous explorers who didn't just discover new lands, they also rewrote European history. 1. Christopher Columbus, 1492. Columbus, sponsored by Spain, crossed the Atlantic and landed in the Caribbean. While we often say he discovered the Americas, he actually reached the islands of the Caribbean. Nonetheless, his voyage forever changed the trajectory of both Europe and the Americas. 2. Hernán Cortés, 1519. Cortés traveled to Mexico and conquered the Aztec Empire. His conquest allowed Spain to establish a powerful foothold in the Americas. 3. Francisco Pizarro, 1532. Pizarro overthrew the Inca Empire in what is now Peru. The vast wealth of gold and silver he extracted significantly boosted Spain's economy. 4. Other explorers. England's John Cabot and France's Jacques Cartier also played key roles in exploration, leading expeditions to North America and Canada, respectively. The Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange refers to the transfer of goods, ideas, plants, animals, and even diseases between Europe and the Americas. This exchange didn't just involve goods. It transformed entire cultures. 1. From Europe to the Americas. Europeans introduced crops like wheat and barley, as well as animals like horses and cattle. These additions significantly changed indigenous peoples' ways of life. 2. From the Americas to Europe. Europeans brought back crops like potatoes, maize, and tobacco. Potatoes and maize revolutionized European diets and food security. 3. Spread of diseases. Tragically, diseases such as smallpox and measles were introduced to the Americas. These diseases decimated native populations, with some areas losing up to 90% of their people. Spanish colonization. Spain was the first European nation to establish colonies in the Americas, but this process was fraught with conflict and exploitation. 1. The encomienda system. Indigenous peoples were forced into labor under this system. Their exploitation allowed Spain to amass great wealth. 2. Christian missionary efforts. Spain established missions to convert indigenous peoples to Christianity, often at the expense of indigenous cultures and traditions. 3. Resource extraction. Spain extracted vast amounts of gold and silver from the Americas, fueling its economic growth and solidifying its dominance in Europe. Other European powers. While Spain led the way, other European nations quickly followed suit. 1. England. John Cabot's exploration laid the groundwork for English colonization in North America. 2. France. Jacques Cartier explored Canada and opened opportunities for the fur trade. 3. The Netherlands. The Dutch established trade routes and settlements, including New Amsterdam, modern-day New York City. Native American impact. 1. Massive population decline due to disease. One of the most devastating effects European exploration had on Native American societies was the introduction of diseases. Europeans brought new pathogens to the Americas, including smallpox, measles, and influenza. Native Americans had no immunity to these diseases, so they spread rapidly, resulting in catastrophic loss of life. In some areas, native populations declined by more than 90%. Imagine a village of 10 people being reduced to just one survivor. This wasn't just a matter of numbers, it meant the collapse of entire communities. 2. Forced displacement and labor exploitation. But disease wasn't the only issue. Europeans forcibly displaced Native Americans from their lands and subjected them to harsh systems of forced labor. The Spanish encomienda system was a prime example, where Native Americans were forced to work in mines or on plantations. Essentially, their lives and freedoms were taken from them. Losing their land and being forced to work in unfamiliar and brutal conditions caused immense physical and emotional suffering. This wasn't just about losing jobs, it was about survival being put in constant jeopardy. 3. Cultural disruption and loss of autonomy. Lastly, one of the most significant impacts on Native societies was the disruption of their culture. Native Americans were pressured to adopt European languages, religions, and ways of life. Europeans believed their own ways were superior, which led to the dismissal or outright destruction of indigenous traditions and cultures. For example, traditional ceremonies and social norms that had been passed down for generations were lost. On top of that, Native Americans lost their ability to govern their own communities and live according to their own customs. Over time, entire societies lost their sense of identity. Technological and navigational advances. European exploration wouldn't have been possible without major technological innovations. 1. The compass and astrolabe. These tools allowed explorers to navigate more accurately, even in uncharted waters. 2. Caravel ships. These fast, durable ships were designed to handle long voyages in rough seas, making transatlantic exploration feasible. 3. The legacy of exploration. European exploration solidified Europe's position as a global power. However, it also led to the destruction of indigenous cultures and the rise of systems like the transatlantic slave trade. The legacy of European exploration. Finally, let's examine the long-term impacts of European exploration. 1. Shift in global trade routes. European exploration reshaped global trade, with Europe becoming the center of economic activity. 2. The Atlantic slave trade. Exploration laid the groundwork for the transatlantic slave trade and the development of triangular trade routes. 3. Modern political and cultural boundaries. European colonization shaped today's political borders and cultural identities. For example, Spanish and Portuguese are still dominant languages in Latin America. Summary and key takeaways. As we wrap up, let's review the key points. 1. European exploration was driven by the desire for wealth, religion, and empire building. 2. Explorers like Columbus, Cortés, and Pizarro transformed the Americas. 3. European contact devastated Native American societies through disease and colonization. 4. The Columbian Exchange revolutionized economies and diets around the world. 5. Exploration set the stage for European colonization and the exploitation of resources and people. European exploration was one of the most transformative events in world history. While it led to economic and political progress, it also came at a great cost to indigenous populations. Understanding both the positive and negative legacies of this period is essential to understanding the world we live in today.